Veterans in Transition is sponsored by HireVeteransFirst.com, Jelani Consulting, and Village Connector Community.
Welcome to Veterans in Transition, where we promote the veteran community. Each week, we travel around the region highlighting veteran-related news, issues, and events. Whether you're a veteran business owner providing products and services to the government or the private sector, giving back to the community, or in transition to civilian life, we tell your story. First up, she's the first woman and first African American to hold the executive director's position at the American Legion, one of America's oldest veteran advocacy organizations. Correspondent Angel Livers sat down with Verna Jones.
You've been in your role as the first female executive director of the American Legion. What would you say has been your most memorable achievement thus far?
Yeah, there's so many things. This is such a great opportunity to be able to have, to be able to serve in this capacity. You know, there are a lot of things that veterans need, and it gives people who normally wouldn't be considered for particular positions definitely hope to say, you know, if I work hard, I can do this too. So there have been times when I've been out traveling and there have been young women who will come up and say, you know, I'm a junior in college, or I've just graduated and I've been following you, and it just, you know, gives me hope and confidence to know that I can do the same thing. So those things are very memorable.
How do you think the trajectory and the American Legion have shifted since your presence?
We were founded in 1919, and things were very different. And, you know, although, you know, men of all colors, all races, fought in the same war, when they came back, the American Legion had different posts. There were posts where predominantly African Americans went to, you know, share their stories and have that comradeship, and then posts that were considered the white post. And so for over the years, it's just always been, you know, a white male in this position. I think now it just raises the awareness that the face of the military is changing and the face of veterans are changing. And so being the organization that we are, we have to change with it. And you know, most people have been very receptive. It's all about having the passion and the heart to take care of veterans. And, you know, our 2.2 million members, they look for that. And I think they are now, you know, saying it doesn't matter what that person looks like. It's that the person has the head and the heart to take care of our veterans, and that's what's important.
Now, for the people who may not know the role and responsibilities of the American Legion.
So the American Legion is the nation's largest wartime veterans service organization, founded in 1919, under the 4 principles or pillars of taking care of our veterans, mentoring our youth, promoting patriotism and pride, and promoting a strong national defense. And so we do that by our divisions. We have the Legislative Division here in Washington, D.C., our Veteran Affairs and Rehabilitation Division, Veterans Employment and Education, and National Security. We go out and make sure that veterans get their health care that they deserve, make sure they receive the disability compensation. We have over 3,000 accredited and trained professional representatives across the country to do that. We liaison directly with the President, with DOD, with Congress, with the VA, and all other community partners and those who have an interest in veterans.
Can you speak to me a little bit about the choice cards? Are those still in effect? Are they working?
The Choice Act was set up to be a temporary program. Veterans who were more than 40 miles from the nearest VA facility, or who could not be seen within 30 days at their VA, they had the option to go out and find a facility. Now, for that temporary time and for what it was needed for, Choice was a great program. But the VA also has a program, Fee Basis, which they were doing the same thing. If they could not accommodate the veteran, they would buy the veteran purchase care, which was our Fee Basis program. Veterans are still going to be taken care of under that VA healthcare system, because if they're not able to be seen by the VA, if they can't provide those services, or it's not advantageous for the veteran to drive to their local facility, the VA will still purchase care and take care of veterans.
You transitioned from your military life about 11 years ago.
That's right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
I think that, especially at that time, the TAPS program and the transition program wasn't as strong as it is right now. I just, you know, I was getting out of the military and I thought, there's so many opportunities, and it won't be that big of a transition. I'm going to be living in the same area. I'll just go from one job, just get out and find something different. But it was a big transition. I didn't take advantage of the TAPS program. Back then, they didn't make you go. It wasn't mandatory. It just signed the paperwork, and I was looking at the clock, ready to get out of there. And what I found after being so excited a couple of weeks, have nothing to do, I don't have to put on a uniform, nobody tells me what to do, was that there was a whole big world out there, and I had spent the last 8 years of my life knowing exactly what I was going to wear to work, knowing exactly what time I was going to be there, being told what to do all the time, and the transition was a little bit bigger than I thought. So I looked for jobs, and really with my background, I worked finance in the military personnel, and I thought it'll be so easy for me to get a job. I hadn't properly taken advantage of the resources in the military, and so my resume didn't look like a civilian resume. So I kind of had to start all over again and just work that from the outside without the resources that I would have been privy to still being in the military.
Did you have any major hardships throughout that transitional period?
Well, when I got out, I got married to someone who was in the military, so it was still kind of attached to the military. Had been a long-term relationship, and it didn't quite work out. He had been deployed and had some issues, and I found myself in an abusive situation. And going through that and not having, family in that particular area, because I stayed in where I transitioned, and my family was in North Carolina. I found myself being, I was alone and not really having anyone to talk to or really have that support group that I needed. So I ended up transferring. I found a job at the Department of Labor and worked there for a little bit and transitioned to get out of that personal situation I was in. And I found myself homeless. I was, lived in my car for about 17 days. And, people talk about chronic homelessness, but I'll tell you from experience, one day without somewhere to live is a hardship. And, for me, fortunately, I didn't have children, and it was just me to take care of. But, it was a lot to deal with, not knowing who to talk to or where to go and how to really manage that situation. But I will tell you that my military background, knowing that, anything is possible to overcome, and from my spiritual upbringing, knowing to pray and to just find every kind of, all the strength I had inside of me to just get past it, to say, you know what, you've been in tougher situations than this, pray about it and get through it, and I did.
Now, with that being said, I know the VA has a initiative to end homelessness for veterans over the course of the next 5 years. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think any program that's set up to help segments of veterans that need help, like homeless veterans and veterans with, PTSD, or those at-risk groups. But I will tell you that to end homelessness and to put a time period on it, 5 years, I think is an overstatement of what really can be happened. You'd have to end, mental illness, domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, balance the budget. How can you do all of that in 5 years? Now, I think that we can lower the homelessness rate, and I think that the VA has done a great job at doing that. But when you look at numbers and you talk about functional zero, having been in that situation, even if only for 17 days, there's nothing functional about not having a home to go to. And then you couple that with veterans who have families. Imagine a mother who has a baby, has her children. She knows that if she goes to the VA and says that I'm homeless, and if they don't have anywhere for her, the first initial thing is they're probably going to try to take her children away. What mother would do that? So instead, huddles up with her children at night in an abandoned building or her home or from place to place on someone's sofa, wherever she can go. And I think that we have to find a way to make sure that you can keep the family intact, because that's truly what's important. It's just, imagine a man who can't provide for his family, who wants to go out and find a job, and you don't know where your family's going to be. They're somewhere where they're not warm, or they're, it's very hot, or they don't have food. So I think that we have to take a holistic approach to taking care of the entire family, the entire veteran, and everything that goes along with him or her.
What would you say would be some great resources for women transitioning out of the military? What would be your words of encouragement to them?
The first thing I'll say is be honest with yourself. Everybody has a story. And if you've gone through some of the things that, as I mentioned earlier, that I've gone through, be willing to tell your story. But at your time, it's your story. But the story that you tell and the things that you've gone through really could help someone else. And it provides, at least for me, healing. The more I tell my story, the more I'm aware that there are other women or other service members who go through this. And one of the worst things is to feel alone, like no one understands, nobody else has been through this. So, take advantage of all the resources that the military has to offer. Before you get out, there's a wonderful TAP program. There's the Soldier for Life, Marine for Life programs, if you're in one of those branches of the military. Reach out to those resources and make sure that you just have a support group. Talk to your family, talk to people who you're close to. And most of all, love and respect yourself and understand that only goodness and greatness is meant for you. And we all have the ability and the power to do that.
In this week's Vets Talk, health advocate Ronald Steptoe speaks on what his company is doing to promote veterans' health.
As veterans, we have to do more of this. Not only are we a community, we're a family. I can go anywhere in this country, and I walk in the room, and I say, I went to West Point, my wife went to West Point, and for some reason, no matter who's in the room, I don't care what your background is, they know and they make a connection relative to the military, and everything changes as it relates to that interaction. But unfortunately, a lot of us are disenfranchised, we're not connected, and I'm talking about us that are doing well and appear to be making it in their community. One of the biggest areas that my team has focused on, and my company is Warrior Centric Health, and I can tell you, when I got out of the military, my wife and I had an opportunity to work for a major corporation if it was going through its growth phase. In fact, it was a company when we started with this particular company, they're doing about $6 billion in business. When we left 14 years later, or I did, they were doing $46 billion in business. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it's important when we're out and and it took me about 2 to 3 years to get myself comfortable in that company and recognize what was I going to do. But I realized it was a tremendous opportunity to learn and see and find what the gaps are. And as you stated, as veterans, we're always looking at a situation and figuring out what the challenges are and how do we solve it. And we solve it a lot of times before people even recognize it as being a problem. Well, I had the fortune of being able to work with this company and see some gaps. And one of the gaps that we saw was we recognized, initially starting out, realizing that different people with different backgrounds in the healthcare setting weren't getting the proper treatment that they needed based on who they were. Medicine just hadn't evolved to understand what we now term as population health or patient-centered health. So I became one of the local experts in the Washington, D.C. market working for this major pharmaceutical company on addressing some of those issues. What I didn't recognize is developing that skill set, and again, that was an additional duty. Why do we always take on additional duties where we're at? I guess it's just the way we're made up. But what I didn't recognize was that additional duty would turn into a multi-million-dollar company. And one of the things we were able to do was to take some of the things that we were looking at as it relates to different people with different backgrounds, and we realized that there was a gap in veteran health care. And what we recognized was that veterans, and again, a lot of people think that the majority of veterans are getting their health care at the VA, when the fact of the matter is less than 30% of veterans are actually registered with the VA for services. Now, the challenge is we as Americans are going with that narrative thinking that all veterans are being seen by the VA. The challenge is if we don't recognize that 70% of us are not in the VA, then the other side of the coin is then where are we at? We're in the commercial healthcare sector. So our company thinks about that every single day. who's training the commercial healthcare sector to understand our unique needs, the things that we've been exposed to, the things and environments that we've worked in, and how that's impacted our health, how it impacts our family and how they work with us and how they communicate with us. And not only that, how about our families that have been affected by service and their health? So our company has focused on that, so we're very fortunate to work with the American Hospital Association's Institute for Diversity. We were actually recognized as the Member of the Year this past year, and that's interesting because there are about 1,200 organizations that's a part of the Institute. Most of them are hospitals and health universities, and our small company was recognized as the Member of the Year. Now, I bring that up only to state that it is so important what's happening to us that you said the nation does love us. But the challenge is sometimes we can't wait for other people to solve our problems. We have to identify, bring our skill sets to the table, bring our assets to the table, and lead the way in solving the problem as it relates to veterans health care. And that's what Warrior Centric Health does. We focus on solving our own problem, and we've created a very unique business model that will be sustainable so that we do operate in a for-profit arena. So we are showing veterans from an entrepreneurial perspective how do you see problems, solve those problems, put a good business case behind it, and make it sustainable so you have some options in moving forward. So those are some things I just wanted to share with you, and appreciate everybody, all the stories I heard today.
What are your company values? In this Redmond Rules, Stacy Redmond, President and CEO of SAMS, shares the importance of company values.
The value of values. Values define us. They determine who we are and where we're headed. When something is that important, don't you think you would see it everywhere? Unfortunately, many companies don't take the time to define their core values, which results in dysfunctional teams. Whether explicit or implicit, every company operates by some set of values. If you're not defining them, they're probably defining you. Take some time and really think about who you are as a company. If you can't easily identify what your values are, or if they aren't even part of the discussion, maybe it's time you reconsider how much you value values.
Veterans in Transition was on hand for the celebration reception for former Congressman and Purple Heart recipient Charles Rangel as he reflected on his career.
If there's one thing that I knew something about, was hard times on Lenox Avenue. You can play all this patriot and hero thing, but when I joined the Army, I didn't even know where the hell Korea was. And when Harry Truman said that on June the 25th, the 2nd Infantry Division was going to go over there because the United Nations had mandated under his leadership to clean up some police action, I couldn't wait to go because I thought it was a civil service job. I could come back, and what the hell? For 13 days, we were on that boat from Fort Lewis, Washington to Busan. And I learned that this was the real thing. Needless to say, we thought it was victorious until the Chinese came in. And you only have to be in combat for one day longer than someone comes there, just like the Congress, really. If a guy's been here 1 year and you haven't been here 1 day, he's a veteran. And I would tell this group of kids that were coming, figuring we had won the war, you better dig in, keep your weapons clean, and be alert, and when you're on guard duty, be a good guard, because the Chinese got to come, and you got to be ready for them. I had no clue that the damn Chinese were thinking about coming there. So when I heard that the Chinese were coming, I thought maybe this was one of the damn rumors I had started. And when they told us that we had been completely surrounded by tens of thousands of Chinese, I could not comprehend how in the hell that could happen. We were victorious from the time we landed, going up past the 38th parallel, going right up to the borders of China. And in that nightmare with horses and bugles and mortars and screaming and yelling and a blast that I don't know where it came from, I figured it was all over. But having been an altar boy, I prayed in English and Latin and tongues. And all the time I'm having this deep spiritual, emotional feeling, I felt, and nobody listened to me anyway, what the hell? And when it was all over, and I figured that I was still in one piece, it was then that I realized that I could never, never, never experience anything that I could complain about. And I was tested. You know, I had a brother 7 years older. He was my father, my friend, he was everything. When God took him away at 52 years old, I was just about to curse the darkness. When I remembered all of the promises and all the blessings I had, I lost a mother, I lost a father. But each time, and I'm saying this almost like, not as a spiritual leader, but as a guy that's 86 years old, each time something came close to wiping the smile off my face, I realized that it can't be as worse as what I went through on November 30th, 1950. I was surprised that this turned out to be that very same day. November 30th, 1950. But the additional blessing that you get, and counting your blessings, is that the problem doesn't go away, but it diminishes compared to remembering what it could be. So what you've done for me this evening is a very moving thing, because I don't know what challenges are out there, but I can never forget the friendships that have been built over the years. Thank you with all my heart. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, staff.
A little bit about my background. Actually, I'm a military brat. I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia, and my dad was in the Air Force. Well, actually, I went into the military because my father recommended. So as a result of that recommendation, I decided to try Army ROTC, and the rest is history. In the Army, I was an Army logistics officer, responsible for maintaining military equipment for the combat arms and combat service organizations within the Army. After I left the military, I went straight to corporate America. I worked for a multi-million-dollar technology company where I started off in sales and transitioned to customer service. But I thought, the best way to learn a business world was to jump right in. A little bit about BLS Group. We started off initially as focusing on event planning and project management. We have recently, through partnerships, expanded our services into staff augmentation for technical specialties and healthcare. And additionally, we do administrative services and logistics support. One of the unique challenges about attempting to do business with the government is that the government doesn't want to do business with you unless you've done business with them before. This year, we were actually able to present a check for $1,000 to the Women's Memorial Foundation. My military experience prepared me very well for the business world. My leadership skills, organizational, problem solving, all those skills I use on a daily basis to run my business. Military also taught me how to overcome adversity and realize that failure is not an option. So if you can't do it one way, you need to figure out another way, because there is a way to get it done.
That's a wrap for this edition of Veterans in Transition. We invite you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have a story suggestion, go to our website, vetsintransition.com. Remember, we all have a story to tell. Until next time.